Before I launch into this new video, I do want to give a shout out to all my subscribers. It's been great watching my subscriber count gradually grow, and I also want to give a huge thank you and shout out to all those people who engage with my content, the people who hit like and the people who leave comments. You help me to stay motivated, and of course you are helping me to keep my channel going. I probably should also apologise for the absence of videos over the last couple of days. This week was the last week of the Ancient Egypt Pharaoh exhibition down in Melbourne, so day before yesterday I headed down to Melbourne for the day to check that out, which was absolutely fantastic. And yesterday was just a catch-up day, catching up on things that didn't get done the day before, hence the reason there's been a few days break. Now this video really ticked me off no end. Seems like there's suddenly this whole bunch of videos coming out that are created by AI and are putting out either damaging or misinforming videos. This probably counts as both, and I just wanted to call it out. I'm not going to even bother giving the name of the content creator, and to be honest, I've lost that already. I basically got the video, got the screenshot, and here we go. So this video was called Most Hated Cities in Australia, and this is, yeah, I will pre-warn you, this will probably make you annoyed as well.
What if I told you that some of Australia's most well-known cities are the ones people hate the most? That's right. Cities you'd expect to be paradise are leaving residents frustrated, broke, and ready to pack their bags. From crazy living costs that'll drain your bank account faster than you can blink, to weather so unpredictable, it's like nature's playing a prank on you. There are places in Australia that people are desperate to escape. But here's the real kicker. Millions of tourists still flock to these cities every year, completely unaware of what's really going on. So what's the deal? Why do some people absolutely love these places, while others can't stand another day there? Today we're counting down the 10 most hated cities in Australia, and trust me, you won't believe some of the reasons people are running for the exits. If you're thinking about moving or even just visiting, you might want to think twice after this. So stay tuned. You don't want to miss which city tops the list.
So you know immediately it's going to be a bad video when you get AI generated American voice plus stock footage, most of which isn't even in Australia.
Number 10, Darwin. A city that's definitely not for the faint-hearted. On the surface, Darwin might seem like the perfect tropical getaway, but living there is a whole different story. The first thing you'll notice, the heat and humidity. Darwin's weather is notorious, especially during the wet season when the humidity can skyrocket, making it feel like you're walking through a sauna every day. For many, it's just unbearable. Air conditioning is not a luxury here, it's a necessity. And then there's the isolation. Darwin is incredibly remote, sitting over 3,000 kilometers away from major cities like Sydney and Melbourne. For some, this isolation adds to the charm, but for others, it feels like you're cut off from the rest of the country. This remoteness also drives up prices. Whether it's groceries, flights, or basic services, everything seems to cost more here. Lastly, there's the wildlife. Yes, Darwin is famous for its crocodiles and unique animals, but it's not just a tourist attraction. For locals, living with the constant reality of dangerous wildlife is just part of life. Croc warnings and snake encounters can quickly turn what might seem like paradise into a place that's a little too wild for comfort. So while Darwin has its beauty and its fans, it's clear that the extreme weather, isolation, and wildlife make it a tough place to live for many.
So I thought this image was the perfect image to show the absurdity of the stock footage that they used. Because, like, sure, we have lions in Australia. in a zoo, and they had what, elk or something, some sort of other animal in a herd that we don't have in Australia. And let's talk about this whole notion of, oh, people in Darwin live in fear of crocodiles and snakes. No, they don't. People who live in Darwin are actually intelligent enough to know that you don't go swimming in locations where there are going to be crocs, or you stay away from the edge of the water when you're in an area with crocs that are around. It's not like a croc is going to knock on your front door and be like, excuse me, ma'am, I'm just coming to maul you in your house. So, utter absurdity in suggesting that people who live in Darwin are just in this, state of fear over the wildlife. No. They know where the places are where they are going to be at risk. They understand how to act like a intelligent human being and stay where they're not going to get mauled by a crocodile. In terms of the weather, people that choose to live in Darwin choose to do so because they do love that kind of tropical heat. Otherwise, heck, they'd move to another part of Australia. So these are just insane things to put forward. As for the isolation, yes, maybe it is some distance from bigger cities, but it is still a thriving area. Yes, you do pay higher prices for food, etc., but that's not something that makes people hate living there. You just you take that as part of what it is to live there. It's not. It's like people who live in Tassie. People who live in Tassie don't hate living in Tassie because grocery prices are higher than the other states. They accept that as, well, we are a little further away, things have to be brought across Bass Strait, so we accept that we pay a bit more for our groceries. Sometimes they are overcharged by supermarkets, but that doesn't make them hate Tassie. Maybe that makes them hate the duopoly that exists in Tasmania, but not Tassie. Same with Darwin. They don't hate Darwin because of the cost of food.
Number 9, Adelaide. Next up, we've got Adelaide at number 9. Now you might be thinking, wait, Adelaide? Isn't that the city of churches? Isn't it peaceful and quiet? Well, that's exactly the problem. For a lot of people, Adelaide is just too quiet. While some love the slower pace, others find it, well, boring. If you're someone who craves excitement, nightlife, or a fast-paced lifestyle, Adelaide might feel like it's moving in slow motion. And then there's the economy. Adelaide has long struggled with its job market, especially for younger people. Finding high-paying jobs here can be a real challenge, which has left some residents feeling frustrated. It doesn't help that many big companies are headquartered in cities like Sydney or Melbourne, leaving fewer opportunities for career growth in Adelaide. Public transport is another sticking point. Unlike other major cities in Australia, Adelaide's public transport system isn't as extensive or reliable. Many people find themselves relying heavily on cars, and if you don't drive, getting around can be a hassle. Finally, while it's known for its wineries and festivals, not everyone is into that scene. Adelaide just doesn't have the same buzz as Sydney or Melbourne, and for some, the quietness gets old fast. So while Adelaide may offer a peaceful life for some, for others it's a bit too slow, making it one of the more disliked cities on this list.
So, I've never been to Adelaide, so I would be curious to know just how much of that footage actually was Adelaide, because the majority of it was not even from Australia. This screenshot that I took is in another country that doesn't even speak English, as you can see from the signage on the wall on the right hand side. Now, how insane. Oh, Adelaide is hated because it doesn't have a huge nightlife and it's not big and bustling like Melbourne and Sydney. There's a lot of people that don't enjoy the big city life of Sydney and Melbourne. I know when I went down to Melbourne the other day, going down from Bendigo, it did feel overwhelming because of how busy it was. And a lot of people in Australia feel that way about Melbourne and Sydney. A lot of people love Adelaide because of the atmosphere. And yet, this tosser is claiming that it's Adelaide's atmosphere that makes it one of the most hated places in Australia. What a load of tosh. I know nothing about public transport, so I can't comment on that. But I would imagine that it's still got to be streets ahead of Tasmania, which only has buses.
Number 8, Canberra, Australia's capital city. Now, you'd think being the capital would give Canberra some major points, but believe it or not, a lot of people just aren't fans. One of the biggest complaints? The city feels a bit like a government office that somehow became a city. It's clean, it's organized, but for many it lacks that energy and excitement you'd expect from a capital. First off, let's talk about the vibe. Canberra is home to government buildings, embassies, and national institutions, which gives it a pretty serious and sometimes sterile atmosphere. While it's great for politics and history buffs, for everyday life, it can feel like there's not much going on. The nightlife and entertainment scenes are pretty limited compared to places like Sydney or Melbourne, leaving some feeling like the city is missing that spark. Then there's the weather. Canberra's winters can be freezing, with temperatures often dropping below zero. If you're someone who loves sunshine year-round, Canberra's cold, dry winters might be a shock to the system. And in summer, it's not much better, with dry heat that feels like you're baking in the sun. Another issue is the cost of living. Despite its size, Canberra can be surprisingly expensive. Housing prices are high and day-to-day living isn't exactly cheap either. It leaves many asking, is the cost really worth it? So while Canberra has a lot of national importance, for many Australians, it just doesn't have the excitement or warmth they're looking for, landing it at number 8 on our list.
Okay, I will admit Canberra does seem a little bit sterile when you go there. It is kind of perfectly planned out, and it does feel like everything is perfectly in place. But I'm thinking, the only thing most of us hate about Canberra is the politicians. I'm not a fan of the weather there in winter, but I've only been there once. And when I was there, it was early July, it was freezing cold, it was pouring with rain, so no, it wasn't very exciting. But, you know, that's Canberra weather. If you like that sort of temperate kind of climate, then you like Canberra. So it seems like a pattern here, aside from using a bunch of stock footage that isn't even Australia, is that they're basically pulling out every capital city in Australia and saying that these are the most hated cities in Australia. So, what an utter joke. It really just annoys the crap out of me when someone from another country uses an AI program to create videos like this that are just a pile of crap, basically. Let's see what else they've got to say.
Number 7, Perth. We have Perth, a city that's known for its stunning beaches and laid-back vibe, but also for its extreme isolation. While Perth's beauty can't be denied, the fact that it's literally one of the most isolated cities in the world is a big drawback for many. Perth is over 3,000 kilometers away from the bustling East Coast cities like Sydney and Melbourne, and that distance really starts to feel real when you're living there. Feeling cut off from the rest of Australia is a common complaint. Flights are expensive, and long travel times to visit family or friends in other states can be a hassle. Some people love the peace and quiet, but for others, it can feel like you're living on a different planet. Then there's the cost of living. Despite being so far away, Perth isn't exactly cheap. Housing prices are high, and everyday expenses like groceries and utilities can leave a dent in your wallet. Add that to a job market that heavily relies on the mining industry, and things can get pretty unstable. When the mining boom is on, everything is great, but when it busts, it leaves a lot of people scrambling for work. Sure, Perth has its perks, amazing beaches, beautiful weather, and a relaxed atmosphere. But for many, the isolation and high costs make it a tough place to call home, which is why it sits at number 7 on our list.
If this guy had the faintest clue of how huge Western Australia was, he would realise that Perth is far from isolated. Yes, it might be a long way from Sydney or Canberra or Melbourne, but it's surrounded by towns like, you know, Western Australia is okay. You've got to go across the Nullarbor to get there, but let's be real. I've never heard anyone say that they hate Perth. Perth is like this mecca for a lot of Australians, a place that you want to visit because it does have this beautiful weather and it does have this major attraction of the beauty of the beaches and stuff like that. And I find it hilarious that he keeps talking about cost of living and he's referring to, it's all capital cities. And the cost of living and cost of houses is always going to be more expensive in capital cities. So of course it is going to cost you more to buy a house in Perth than to go to Carnarvon and buy a house. Because that's just the way the economy works.
Number 6. Brisbane. Next up is Brisbane, Australia's third largest city, known for its sunny weather and laid-back lifestyle. But not everyone is thrilled to live here. Let's start with the climate. Sure, Brisbane is warm, but during the summer months, it can get unbearably hot and humid. The humidity is so intense that just stepping outside feels like walking into a sauna. Some people might love that tropical heat, but for others, it's a sweaty, uncomfortable struggle every single day. Then there's the traffic. Brisbane's public transport system leaves a lot to be desired, and with the city's population growing rapidly, congestion on the roads is becoming a serious issue. If you're trying to drive through the city during peak hours, you're going to need a lot of patience. The layout of the city doesn't make commuting any easier either, especially for those living in the outer suburbs. While Brisbane is definitely evolving with more cultural events and new restaurants popping up, it still lacks the energy of bigger cities like Sydney or Melbourne. Some feel it's a little too slow-paced and doesn't offer the same excitement or variety, making it less appealing for those looking for a more vibrant city experience. Between the stifling weather, traffic issues, and a somewhat quiet atmosphere, Brisbane isn't everyone's ideal place to live. Despite its sunny charm, it leaves many people wanting more from their city experience.
Funny, because most people move to Brisbane for the weather. It's in a coastal area, so it's not that dry inland heat that just stifles you. A lot of people do. I mean, look how many people from the UK end up in Brisbane or in areas close to Brisbane. So it seems like this guy is taking opposites for different cities and saying they're the things that make people hate them. So it's not a logical argument. You can't turn around and say on one hand, oh, people hate Canberra because it's so cold, and then on the other hand, people hate Brisbane because it's so hot. Well, you're going to have weather. Whatever city you're in, you're going to have weather. So people might not love the weather sometimes, but come on, be realistic. As for the traffic, I can't comment on that. It's been a really, really long time since I've been to Brisbane. But hey, let's talk about isn't it, they have 50-cent fares now on public transport. So, public transport can't be all that bad, surely. And the videos I've seen from people who've moved to Brisbane, they don't seem to have issues with the public transport there. It seems to me that all this video is nitpicking. And all these things are things that are, perhaps they are downsides to the areas. Perhaps people aren't enraptured with the traffic in Brisbane. But I've never heard anyone say, I hate Brisbane because it's warm. Or I hate Brisbane because there's traffic. You want bad traffic? Go to Sydney. I'm not a fan of Sydney traffic. If I can avoid driving through Sydney, I will. But I can't see Brisbane as being on par with that. But apparently it's not exciting either compared to Sydney and Melbourne. Everything I've heard recently about Brisbane is that it is growing so much and becoming quite a great place to visit because it is such a busy place. So I guess excitement depends on your definition. So we're only halfway through the list, and I've ranted so much that we're already up to 20 minutes for this video. And if you are familiar with my videos, you know I don't like to make them too long. So I'm going to stop it here, and I will make a second half of this video to look at the top 5 most hated cities in Australia, which presumably we can add in the other capital cities that haven't been covered, and then we obviously need to find a few extras, probably the most well-known cities, to fill in the gaps to make it 5. Let me know what you think so far of this video. Did it make your blood boil as much as mine? And what I would love to see in the comments section for this video is people shouting out the things that make them love those cities that have been mentioned so far. Because this has been such a negative video, and it's giving such a negative idea of these cities, and they're not like that. So let's have some shout outs below of what are the great things about these cities that have been listed so far in this video. So thanks for listening. Hit the like button. If you're new, please subscribe, and come back tomorrow for the second half of this video.